Introduction. Economic sanctions have become a popular tool used by countries and international organizations to influence the behavior of other countries. The aim of sanctions is to cause economic harm to the target country and force it to change its policies. The use of economic sanctions has been particularly effective in the case of Russia, where NATO countries have imposed a variety of sanctions since the Ukraine crisis in 2014. However, the use of sanctions has also led to strained relations between NATO and Russia. Background. In 2014, Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine, which led to a deterioration of relations between Russia and NATO countries. The United States and European Union imposed economic sanctions on Russia as a response to its actions in Ukraine. The sanctions targeted Russia's energy, banking, and defense sectors, as well as individuals and entities closely linked to the Russian government. The aim of the sanctions was to put pressure on Russia to withdraw from Crimea and end its support for separatist rebels in eastern Ukraine. Since then, Russia has been hit hard by the sanctions. The Russian economy relies heavily on its energy exports, and the sanctions have had a significant impact on its ability to export oil and gas. The Russian ruble has also suffered, and the country has seen a decline in foreign investment and economic growth. Impact on the NATO-Russia relationship. The imposition of economic sanctions has had a negative impact on the relationship between NATO and Russia. Russia has interpreted the sanctions as an act of aggression against the country and has responded by taking countermeasures, such as banning imports of certain foodstuffs from the EU and limiting access for Western businesses to the Russian market. The sanctions have also led to a deterioration of the security situation in Europe. Russia's aggressive behavior, including the annexation of Crimea and its support for separatist rebels in eastern Ukraine, has led to increased military tensions between Russia and NATO countries. In response, NATO has increased its military presence in Eastern Europe, which has led to further tensions between the two sides. Furthermore, the sanctions have also had unintended consequences. For instance, the Russian economy has become more inward-looking as a result of the sanctions, and the country has formed closer economic ties with China. This has shifted the balance of power in the region and has made Russia less dependent on Western economies. There has also been a negative impact on cultural and people-to-people exchanges between Russia and NATO countries. The sanctions have led to a decrease in the number of cultural and educational exchanges and have made it more difficult for Russians to travel to the West. Is there any room for dialogue? Despite the negative impact of economic sanctions, there is still room for dialogue between NATO and Russia. The two sides share many common interests, including counterterrorism, arms control, and the fight against organized crime. A dialogue between the two sides could help to de-escalate tensions and prevent further conflict. Such a dialogue could involve discussions on the Ukraine crisis, the situation in Syria, and other issues of mutual concern. Given the negative impact of the sanctions on the Russian economy, there is also a need for the West to consider lifting some of the sanctions. A gradual lifting of sanctions could incentivize Russia to cooperate on a range of issues, including arms control and counterterrorism. Conclusion. In conclusion, economic sanctions have had a significant impact on the relationship between NATO and Russia. The sanctions have led to a deterioration of security in Europe and have strained people-to-people exchanges between the two sides. However, there is still room for dialogue between NATO and Russia, and a gradual lifting of sanctions could incentivize Russia to cooperate on a range of issues. Ultimately, a constructive dialogue between the two sides is the best way to prevent further conflict and ensure stability in the region.